Welcome back to Bowls with the Bard. My name is Cakes. I am your host. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about I, Cinna the Poet by Tim Crouch, which is currently playing digitally at the Chicago Shakespeare Theater. It was directed by Tyrone Phillips and it is starring Julian Parker as Cinna. But before we do that, let's get a little high. Alright, y'all. So for this episode, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about I, Cinna the Poet, the play itself, and a little bit less about the specific production elements that came with the Chicago Shakespeare Theater's production of I, Cinna the Poet. But I will dive into some of the production elements a little bit at the end. So as far as I'm aware, Tim Crouch has written 3 of these I, insert Shakespeare character's name here plays. And it seems as though the point of these plays is to educate the audience about the play using the perspective of a different character, and to potentially comment about something in society that is relevant right now while educating the audience about that play. Chicago Shakespeare Theater actually produced I, Banquo before they produced this production of I, Cinna the Poet, and I'll be honest, I watched I, Banquo before I watched this one, and I was a little nervous about what I was walking into because I wasn't a huge fan of the structure of I, Banquo. But I was pleasantly surprised by I, Cinna the Poet. I think I, Cinna the Poet, unlike its partners, I, Malvolio and I, Banquo, takes a character that is so minuscule to the actual plot of Julius Caesar and tells their story in addition to the story of Julius Caesar. And I think the reason why this is effective and exciting is because in I, Banquo, and I'm assuming what happens in I, Malvolio, though I have not seen it nor read it, so I can't really comment on it, but in I, Banquo specifically, you got a lot of Banquo telling you the story of Macbeth as it happened from his perspective when he was there, but then also telling parts of the story that he wasn't there for, and it could get a little confusing structurally. You could start to sit there and be like, but would you know that that's what Lady M did? You weren't there. I'm not so convinced, I don't know. You started to ask the question, how do you know about these events that happened in private? But with Cinna the Poet, at least in this production, they took things very, very contemporary, and Cinna the Poet was getting updates on his phone or his laptop telling him about what was happening in the events of Julius Caesar, which is how we keep up with the story of Julius Caesar, which is how the play is educating us about the events of Julius Caesar, but it keeps everything centered on Cinna. I love this because in the context of the play, all we really know about Cinna the Poet is that he is a poet who gets mistaken for being Cinna the conspirator and gets his butt kicked for no good reason. I think a lot of contemporary adaptations of Shakespeare fail because we have a tendency to be very precious about the important characters that Shakespeare wrote. I think this play shows us a really cool path forward for adapting Shakespeare by giving dimension to some of his lesser known but still so significant characters and expounding upon their stories. And frankly, I don't know if this is Tim Crouch striking gold here, or if this is a combination of Tim Crouch and the casting done by the Chicago Shakespeare Theater striking gold here, but they use Cinna the Poet's story to tell a story that is so relevant and so important right now. At the beginning of the play, Cinna arrives home from grocery shopping and he just wants to shut himself inside, shut out all the noise, and work on his art. As Cinna sits and tries to write and is constantly berated by updates about what is happening in the political world, he finds that the weight of the world starts to sink in, and he begins to reflect on, is it even important for him to be a poet? Do his words mean anything? Or is he hiding behind them? Cinna does not like Caesar, and he talks about how the police don't trust him, the politicians don't trust him, but for some reason the people eat him up, which I think is a motif some of us can relate to. Throughout the play, there are several really cool moments in which the author and the actor ask us to take a moment or two to literally take out a pen and paper and write answers to questions like, what would you die for? What would you kill for? I think today, when a lot of us have little itty-bitty attention spans, this is a really smart device to put in a play. It has the audience take its attention from one thing to another thing. It gives them an activity to do, and then it asks them to reinvest themselves in what is in front of them. I think having a pause like that is brilliant for today's audiences, especially in a play that is already so short. I really loved that every time Cinna mentioned the other Cinna, Cinna the conspirator, he said the words, "not me," which I thought was some really brilliant foreshadowing. Overall, I thought at least this production, and granted that every other production requires the character of Cinna to be black, I think this play draws some brilliant parallels between Cinna the poet and black men in the United States. I think it says something so strong and powerful, taking this seemingly small Shakespeare character and telling his story of either a mistaken identity, or if you look a little deeper, perhaps people just not really caring about what that person's true identity is at all. I also think it very brilliantly explores the ideals versus the reality of a republic as a form of government. And I just want to finish by reading some of the quotes that stuck out to me that I found to be the most powerful. "Words are also pictures. They could change the world. Some words are not free. Some words get you killed. I word you to death. I want to write about love, freedom, peace. This world won't let me." After Cinna listens to Mark Antony give his eulogy about Julius Caesar, he says, "He's the poet. I'm nothing." And then the final and most important quote that stuck with me is, "My death is a warning that only serves a purpose if my story is told." Now, just a few production elements that are specific to the Chicago Shakespeare Theater's production of I, Cinna the Poet. We're a year into this pandemic, and finally some theaters are finding a way to safely bring us theater that isn't Zoom theater. Now, I love Zoom theater. It has a special place in my heart, but it is so much more exciting to see us innovate in this way. The show is filmed on a stage, but since there isn't an audience, there are no limits to what the cameramen can do in the theater. And so we get some nice, exciting angles. They actually played with filming with, it seemed like an actual webcam, and the microphone quality changed a little bit when they would film using that camera. I really love traditionally filmed theater when the audience is in the house and all of that, but like I said, it can tend to get limited to 2 or 3 shots that aren't going to disturb the people in the house who also paid to see the show. This was so much more dynamic, must have taken so much more planning and so much more work, but I think it's the way that we need to go when it comes to filming theater in the future. I love being able to hear an audience laugh or react to whatever is going on stage, but when it comes to bringing stage work to an audience at home, I think that this way of doing it is so much more exciting and gives so much more to an audience, and especially if you're going to have your audience at home pay for this theater, which Chicago Shakespeare Theater is doing. I think this has to be the way to go. You have to think about the audience who is viewing it and the way that they'll be viewing it. The set was beautiful. It felt both like an actual apartment, but at the same time was 100% still a theater set, which was so satisfying knowing that I'm watching something that is supposed to be a theater experience and knowing that they didn't just cop out and use a real apartment. And lastly, Julian Parker as Cinna the Poet is a powerhouse. He has these absolutely grand, completely emotion-filled, loud moments, but he also has these moments of coming down to a whisper, and you just hang on every word he has to say. You believe every feeling that he is sharing with you, because I think a lot of it is very real and very personal for this actor. There is an honesty in Julian Parker's performance that is absolutely palpable. Like I said at the top of this review, right before I watched I, Cinna the Poet, I watched I Banquo, and I didn't like it very much. I didn't love the actor and director's choices so much, and I was not sure that I actually wanted to step into another one-man show that was 20 minutes longer than I Banquo was. It never felt 20 minutes longer than I Banquo. I was so deeply invested in this play. I believe it plays until May 5th. You can buy a ticket for $25 on the Chicago Shakespeare Theater's website. I highly recommend you do so because this is what contemporary adapted Shakespeare should look like. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to see more content like it, please like us on Facebook at Bowls with the Bard, subscribe to us on YouTube and WeedTube at Bowls with the Bard, and follow us on Instagram at Stoned Shakespeare. See y'all next time.
Lay me where sad true lover never find my grave to weep there.